right. Well, so as promised, here we are going to jump into our first chapter of the book, The Complete Green Letters. Today, we are joined by Josh Mathew. Josh was on staff while Dennis and I were at the Bible school. His first year was our second year, so he was kind of in transition, but he's been somebody over the years that we've kept in contact with. And so today we're going to be interviewing Josh on chapter 1, or I shouldn't say interviewing, I should say joining our discussion on chapter 1, Faith by Miles Stanford. So Josh, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners?
So my name is Josh Mathew. My wife and I, her name is Tamara, are currently in Jackson, Michigan, wrapping up our time at what used to be Ethnos360 Bible Institute, formerly known as New Tribes Bible Institute. We are en route to Waukesha, Wisconsin, where we will join most of the other staff at our sister school. And we're going to be the alumni coaches for the Bible school students that graduate and are on their way to training, further training with Ethnos360. We have been missionaries with Ethnos360 for going on 16 years and have loved almost every minute of it. It's been challenging and I think an adventure in the truest sense of the word, trusting God and watching him work and change the lives of students and really our own lives as well, as we've spent time studying his word and watching the word of God impact the lives of those that studied alongside it.
That's awesome.
Also, something noteworthy is Josh has pretty much a van full of kids, like not a small van either.
It's actually a Suburban full of kids.
It is a full Suburban.
It is a very, very full Suburban, though it is about to get a little bit less full because I have one daughter that's graduating high school this year. So she's got her own car, and doesn't matter because I've still got 3 boys in booster seats, but it's full anyway.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna say it's gonna get a little bit smaller because we decided we don't like one of our kids, and we're just gonna kick them out.
They're too stressful. We decided.
Jackson.
Yeah, they're getting left behind in Jackson.
Yeah, right. Can't afford.
Yeah. So then, so as promised to our listeners that we said we would record this right away. It's been about 3 weeks, but got the gap, and we'll get it going. But this chapter of faith, I know, like when I read it, I think maybe my overall experience with faith may be different from you guys, because I know you grew up in the church, but maybe you did have something similar to me. Is that I didn't really start coming to church till I was like 20. I had been hit by the schools and high school and everything just saying evolution, and I was really sitting there going, I don't know if I believe in God. I don't know if I believe. And that was my hard point coming into Christian faith or whatever, was just at a certain point, it was like, I want to believe, but I can't. I had this weird feeling of like, I feel like I'm lying to myself if I say I believe. Like it was kind of like this, I want to, but I still can't feel like I can honestly say I do. Until finally one day when it came to faith, where I just said, okay, you know what? I'm just going to believe. I'm just going to say, all right, I believe in God. I've heard these things. I'm just going to say I believe. Let's just move forward with that, And a week later, somebody presented the gospel to me and got saved. And that was my initial thing with faith, because it really wasn't like this. When we talked about in Bible school, different epistemologies, like how did you come, like the study of knowledge. Why do you know what you know? Like some people have this mystical thing of like, I just had this dream that I need to go to church, and some mystical experience or something appeared to them. And to me, it was just like, just a period of just like one day me saying like, okay, I'm just going to declare it. Today, I believe in God. I believe God created the heavens and the earth, created me. And the rest kind of fell in line of like, therefore, I guess I believe in the Bible. But when it comes to this chapter, like, what do you guys think? What was your experience with faith to your walk and through your walk, I guess?
So I guess I kind of came to faith very much differently than you, and that's cool. like I love to hear stories of, you know, of people coming to that point in life where it was just I've got to believe this. I it's one of those, like, sometimes I feel like I missed out on that opportunity, but at the same time I don't regret, you know, the way I was introduced to faith. Faith for me was, it was almost a foregone conclusion. I think for me, the way I grew up, my dad and mom both lived, I mean, they were both believers as long as, well, as long as I've known them. And that was just a matter of life. We, you know, we were a Christian family. My dad was a pastor, and we grew up reading the Bible. It was almost assumed that you would believe that this is true because we know it's true, and we're teaching you, you know, God loves you. He sent his son to die for you. At the same time that, you know, this is what the letter A looks like, and that's the color
Right.
blue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's great. That's a true gift. I mean, godly heritage is huge. But at the same point, I agree with you, Matt, there has to come that point in your life where, you know, you have seen what the Bible presents, whether that's through what your parents have brought you up with, or, you know, what you've learned in church, or whatever it is, somebody presenting the gospel to you as an adult where you can logically think through it. And I mean, for me, I didn't grow up a great, I mean, I was a good kid. I was a church kid, but I did just about everything I could to, you know, fake all my school friends out that I wasn't a churchy kid, because I wanted to be a cool kid. Now, I failed miserably at that, but it took me coming to that point of realizing that I wasn't fooling anyone. I mean, I wasn't fooling God that I didn't know him, and I wasn't fooling my school friends that I didn't know God, and the only one that was being fooled was myself. And there was that moment where I had to make the same decision that you made, Matt, was, well, this is what I know to be true. I know that God is who he says he is. I've seen him working in my life, in my parents' life, in my family's life, all, you know, for these 18 years. And I'm trying to live in a way that is different than that. What am I doing here? So I had to come to that same point where it's like, what do I believe? Do I believe that God is all the things he says he is, that he wants that relationship with me? Or do I think I've got a better plan? So I don't know. I'm like, maybe you're a smarter guy than me, Matt, because you didn't waste 18 years getting there. You just didn't have the 18 years of seeing it, you know, work out in your life.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that I don't know where I would fit in that. I'm somewhere in the middle. My parents weren't Christians, but they grew up sending me to church. But I think that obviously, and this is kind of dabbling a little bit in what the chapter says, but faith has to be founded on some kind of facts, and everybody has faith and something. And for me, information was just slowly presented to me over time as I was going to church, Sunday schools, and youth groups and stuff. And I think kind of like I like that comparison you made, Josh, that the Bible's true and God is true and Jesus died on the cross, just like this is a letter A and this is how you count from 1 to 10. It's just something that you grew up learning. You kind of, and I know one person who says, I don't really know when I believed the gospel because it was kind of a gradual, the knowledge and the facts kind of came in. And I can kind of agree with that it was sometime in my early teens that I made that decision. I'm not sure exactly when, but it's kind of a bigger question that, you know, I think people wrestle with is what is what kind of information and what kind of facts do you have to believe in order to be justified? That's kind of a hard question to grapple with. Like with you, Matt, like you said, I'm choosing to exercise faith, even though I don't really know. And then lo and behold, God presents you with the gospel a week later. And it's in John, I think chapter 7, where Jesus says, if anyone wants to do God's will, he will know my teaching, whether it's from God or whether I speak from my own authority. So I kind of feel like that minimal amount of faith that there's a God out there and I kind of want to know him, but I don't know anything about him. And then God can open up more information that you need to believe in. But I kind of wrestle with what, especially with people like you, Josh, who grew up in the church, so you have a lot of information. People that don't have as much information, what is that minimum amount? Like, when was I actually saved? Because I believe Jesus died on the cross for my sins, but maybe I didn't believe certain things about Jesus. For instance, I've got a friend who didn't believe in the Trinity when he got saved. He came out of Mormonism, but he knows he was saved. But it wasn't until a little bit later that he realized, oh, this is, there's that crucial knowledge that has to be part of faith. I'm not sure, but faith is a tricky thing because it is based on facts. But then, what facts is faith based on?
So just to prove I'm not a boomer, I will hold up. You can verify I have a cell phone, but I also have a copy of a book, and this one's got what appears to be a pot leaf on the cover, but that's not what it really is. But I've got notes scribbled on, so maybe I'm a little closer to boomer than I'd like to admit. However, in my copy of this Green Letters book, I've got this note scribbled at the top of this chapter from one of the multiple times I've read through it with, older smart guys than me who are closer to boomers than I am. Okay. This is going to sound like a boomer bashing video. Gosh, what are we doing? What are you doing?
We'll take it out in post.
Oh, okay, good. So I've got this quote in here. Well, and I don't even know if it's a quote or just me trying to scribble out the thoughts before they left my mind. But I wrote that all humanity was born with volition, the ability to choose. And I believe that our faith is the application of that volition. So like, I think as we start this conversation about what faith is and how much do you have to know and what specifically do you have to know, I think I like to keep the list very small. And I think biblically the list is pretty small. So I think the first thing that you have to know is that you have the ability to choose. You have the ability to make a decision. And I think we can see the evidence of that all the way back in Genesis, chapter 1, when God is giving Adam, the job that he has to do. You have to pick a name for these animals. Maybe that's not Genesis chapter 1, but all the way back in Genesis, when God is giving Adam his job, and so Adam has to make a choice. What do we call this animal? And then not too far into the future, he's got to decide, what do I do with this tree that I'm not supposed to eat from? But he's got to make a choice. And I think beyond that then is where we come into this conversation about what are the details that we have to know to have that faith that will take us into that relationship with God.
Mm-hmm. So Matt, you've said to me in the past how you've kind of come to the opinion that what is necessary to be believed is pretty minimal. I mean, Josh was just saying like it's a pretty small list. God's not asking for a theology degree before you can believe. And I was just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit, like, because you're kind of more of just the mind of like, I believe Jesus died for my sins, and that's it. Right? I mean, I'm not saying I disagree.
Yeah. I mean, I would usually not want to publicize too much in a way because I think some people think it's more radical than what I'm actually saying.
Right.
But it really is just something so simple. The John 3:16. Whoever believes will have eternal life, and say, okay, well then believes become, well, did you really believe? If you didn't completely change your life, did you really believe? Well, is that what it says? And I know the more and more I read the Bible and the more I understand the Bible, it's funny. It's like the more knowledge I have, the less you almost feel like, okay, there's so much less that you actually need to know to become saved. But, one of the things that I like about this book and what we talked about before in our introduction to this book is like how much it's about the sanctification.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to our sanctification and our growth, and as we grow more and just trust God by faith, it seems like, okay, there's more on that side than it comes to our growth, where
Right.
like I'm pretty radical. Like, if you believe in Jesus, not just to say like, oh, you believe in the name Jesus, okay, you're saved, but just like maybe 2 more ticks beyond that, I think will kind of get you there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's that, Jesus uses the reference of childlike faith. And, I've got 6 kids, and I've seen, 5 of them, five of them, I believe, understand that they're sinners and that, they can't do much to solve that problem.
Mm-hmm.
And, I believe that the 5 that do know are firmly convinced that Jesus is the only way that, they can have a right relationship with a holy God. And it really is simple enough that a child can understand there's a problem with an almighty God that I can't solve, and there is only one offered solution, and it's his son, Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And when we keep it that simple, children really can believe that, and that is childlike faith. And yet for adults, it takes a simplified understanding of faith, and it has to be decontaminated from, I think, what the world has layered on top of what the Bible is actually talking about when we call it faith.
Right.
For them to understand that and be saved.
Yeah. Well, facts. As we grow, we learn more. Like faith, I think we tend to sometimes think that faith is just like a static thing. You believe once and you're done. And that's certainly true of justification. You believe and you're secure in Christ. But every I guess revelation of God himself to you, either through his word or whatever, is then another exercise of faith that has to happen in that new truth. And the clearest example, like from this book, is, and Matt, you've already alluded to this, is in the sanctification portion of Romans, Paul's talking about how to grow, but he's talking about, do you not know that you have been baptized into Christ's death? Do you not know? Well, that's not something I need to know when I'm justified. He doesn't bring that stuff up in Romans 3 and 4. He brings it up later. So yeah, that's not a necessary component of faith initially, but even, and as you grow and challenges come into your life, that are more personal, it's a new exercise of faith. This new information has come, namely that, diagnosed with cancer, I'm wrestling, we know whatever, practical suffering things. Now I have to exercise faith in the character of God in this instance. So as more information gets brought in, we have to keep exercising faith in that information, it seems like. But
yeah, and I love that you're touching on the sanctification side of the conversation, because I think that for, I think if we're all being honest, as believers, it all comes down to faith when we're talking about what do we do when the opportunity to sin presents itself.
Yes.
And it is all about faith when we say no to sin.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, if we're not walking in faith, if we're walking, in our own strength, in our own flesh, in our own, mental, intestinal fortitude, and we're just going to say no all the time to sin. Well, I mean, that is the recipe for disaster every
Mm-hmm.
time. And it takes an act of faith, an act of believing, depending, relying on God's word, the truth that we are dead to sin. We can say no to sin. It takes that act of belief. It takes that act of faith to say, I'm gonna pass on this one.
Right.
I'm not gonna continue to linger on that thought, that image, that whatever that will break my fellowship with God, because I know that there is a better way.
Yeah.
Because of what I know now as I've read and studied.
Well, and that's probably at the heart of what Miles Stanford says when he says, and I kind of scribbled in the margins, the Ben Shapiro quote, "Facts don't care about your feelings."
Yes, I love it. That's great.
But faith, he says, true faith is anchored on scriptural facts.
Yes.
We are certainly not influenced by impressions. Impressions have neither one thing nor the other to do with faith. Faith has to do with the word of God. So when you talk about sanctification and growing and saying no to sin, my impression is that if I give in to sin, I'll be happy and fulfilled and just, not justified, but in happy and joyful and fulfilled. If I do this, that's my impression. But the word of God says, no, sin leads to death. That's not going to, and you're going to be a slave to sin. So every instance like that is a step of faith. Am I going to choose to believe God's word over what I feel in this moment?
Yeah. And never have I, at least I think, not that I could think of, that I've ever purposely said, well, I'm sure glad I did that. Like, I'm really enjoying, just being dead right now. Like,
this was so worth it.
Yeah, this was so worth it. This was so worth it. I'm so glad I did this, There's times where I've done it where I've been like, well, I don't think what I did was right, but I'm just going to have to ask God to forgive me and move on, But I haven't been like, oh, man, I'm just so glad I'm dead right now, like not dead, like my salvation, but just like, oh man, I'm so glad my relationship with God is dead right now, like while I walk in sin.
Yeah.
It never works out that way.
Never does. Right. Never will. Yeah, and I think this differentiation that we're making right here, I think is key, especially as we for future listeners, as you guys continue to go through the book, this Green Letters book, there is a serious difference in conversations when it's coming, when you're talking about sanctification and salvation. Like, those are not the same conversations. And I think I have to remind myself as I read this book and as I talk about things that Miles says, he is not talking to unbelievers. Like, this book is not written to them. Maybe you guys covered that in your intro, but man, you got to keep that clear in your mind that we are talking about truths for, the already at least positionally sanctified individual.
Yeah. And people who are interested in growing. I mean, there's no sense, if as you work with people and try to disciple them and see them grow, you kind of learn, even if a person is justified, you can throw pearls before swine all day and say, hey, read this book about spiritual growth. All you're doing is chucking more facts at them that they're not going to exercise faith in.
Right.
So yeah, you're right. I think it's a book for people who want to grow and who are saved and are interested in that. Well, I mean, he says right the first line is, the aim of this book is to carefully bring out some of the more important principles of spiritual growth, not on how to get saved. So yeah. It's a good point to make.
Yeah, it's one of those books I think would be tough if you just picked up the book and you had no pre-understanding of the Bible or Christianity. You'd just be completely lost. And I have taken this book and I remember one time I was teaching a college group and we went through this first chapter, and it was a complete flop. It wasn't that people didn't want it.
Right.
It was just that, like, they just weren't even there, or even like that. What I learned from it is, like, I think I need to, like, sort of an introduction to this book of, like, what it's really about, because all the time people kept bringing it back to their salvation, not their sanctification. And yes, true. Like, that's even how I kicked off the podcast. It was talking about faith into my salvation. But then, like, this realization of, like, wow, this faith, like, I got saved August 10th, 2003. And faith has, in a way, just so radically changed or transformed in a way that it's like, so many people just keep looking back at that day, that salvation day. That's the day I exercised faith.
Yeah.
Well, no, I've been exercising faith every day, and not just in my salvation, but in my sanctification, and the faith of waking up in the morning being like, okay, well, I'm still positionally saved. I'm still positionally there in Christ. Like, I have died. It's not me that lives, it's Christ. Those truths, really push me through, especially in my failure, where I can go, okay, yeah, I made a mistake. Christ covered it. Repent to that. And now we just got to move on,
Yep.
And that's, so Matt, you made another point, and this is kind of one of my soapboxes that really frustrates me with, and I don't want to necessarily get too deep in the weeds on, a fine point of theology like perseverance of the saints or anything, but it really bothers me that there is such a belief that within Christianity, that kind of like what you said, well, I got saved 25 years ago, so that means that I will always grow and make the right decisions, and I mean, I don't know what my justification 20 years ago has bearing on today in this moment when I have a temptation to sin. Does my justification always lead me to not sin? No, every moment I have to choose to walk by faith and to choose. So, we can obviously rejoice and focus on our initial salvation, but it's every moment and I shared at a Bible study I was at just a week ago, that the picture of Abraham is we always think about how he was, such a man of faith that God called him out of Ur, and he went, and that's certainly true. But every day that Abraham was walking around in the promised land was a step of faith. When after 3 years passed and God's promises didn't come to pass, he could have turned to Sarah and said, all right, let's go back, it's not working. Or after 4 years or 5 years or 10 years, or every day was an attitude of faith of, I could go back and I have got a family there, but I'm going to choose to stay here. The fact that he left initially didn't, 12 years later sustain him. It was a continued attitude of faith.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if we can just jump right into this. Well, let's just do something crazy. Jump into the third paragraph of the chapter. Yeah. So I was reading through this again this afternoon, and of course I cheated and I looked up Dr. Constable's notes.
Yes.
On this Hebrews 11 reference, and I really loved what he said here. So Hebrews 11:1, obviously you guys are pretty familiar with that. Now faith is the evidence, the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And I think, like, it kind of goes back to what you're saying here, Dennis, and I think it kind of goes back again to, my story a little bit, but it's this whole faith being the basis of everything that we do going forward, and how we continue moving forward. And I thought it was really interesting. So there's an old dead Aussie New Testament scholar named Leon Morris, and he said faith is the basis, the substructure. Like the Greek word there literally means that which stands under. It is the foundation. It is the rock that it's built on of all that our Christian life means. And I think that when we start to talk about faith that way, instead of that like minute, like, you know, oh, you made a decision and that was faith, you know, 13 years ago, 17 years ago, I can't do math, you know, and that was the faith that you exercised. And then it begins this conversation as we understand that it is the foundation of our life with God. It begins the conversation that every decision we make is built on it. And then it's only logical, I think, that each day, each decision becomes an act of faith based on the last act of faith, which we knew was true because we read it in the Word of God. And we just continue building until we have this, you know, this unshakable structure of faith that, you know, produces a life that is so different from, you know, the world that we see around us that is shaky and questionable and, you know, doubt ridden.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And he says something, and I guess, right, I mean, I don't have much of a question or about this, but I guess just to add to that foundation that we're building on, I think that we, by default in the church, build pretty shaky foundations, because what we're being told is faith comes by hearing the word of God. Unless our faith is established on facts, it's no more than conjecture, superstition, speculation, presumption. And so if a person isn't, I mean, we went to school for, 2 years at Ethnos, where we're immersed in the word. But if you're not constantly feeding that foundation, so to speak, of the word of God, I mean, everybody builds their life on something. But if you're not feeding the word of God into that, you're gonna build it on other things. There's conjectures, superstitions, speculations, and security in the things of the world. Because what else am I going to build my life on? I got to build it on something. And unless it's the word of God, you're going to find something else that's not as stable and not as faith supporting.
Yeah, I just heard this quote the other day, and I can't remember where. I don't remember if I read it or saw it, ironically. But the quote, I'll paraphrase it. That way you don't have to quote me, and I don't have to quote myself. No one consumes culture without being impacted by it. And I think, especially, it's 2020 and, Netflix subscriptions are through the roof, and, everybody is coming up with their, next streaming service, got Disney Plus and whatever, they're all out there. And I mean, we've got high-speed internet that, would burn your hair off. I remember my Bible school days. I bought a computer, the first computer I owned, and I was out of my mind excited because I got internet service that had 18.8 kbps.
Yes.
And that modem sound still, gives me nightmares. But the rate at which we can now consume the culture around us, the world around us, is blistering. I mean, we got Sirius radio, we can listen to satellite radio from around the world. We can listen to whatever we want, whenever we want, on whatever device we want. We can watch it, we can stream it, we can, whatever. And if we're not pumping the word of God into our minds, and letting that actual truth affect the way we think and believe and relate to others as much or more than we're, clicking the next song or the next YouTube video, man, I think we're fooling ourselves. As believers, I think we're fooling ourselves if we don't think that's going to affect how we make decisions by faith. And I know that the world you know, untouched by the actual truth of the Word of God is, you know, they've got their foot, you know, pedal to the metal into the culture and into whatever they can consume that will either distract or, you know, deaden the pain of living in a world full of sin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that drives a lot of people's motivations for how they live their life is what they're receiving from the culture. And it's almost like the Romans 12, you know, don't be conformed to the image of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Absolutely.
The fact that the culture is pouring in so rapidly, it's almost like that conforming to the image of the world is like happens at I mean, I don't know that there's a quantifiable way to measure how much a person is, you know, conformed by the world system, but it does seem like it's pressing in harder, more rapidly. There's just more coming in, and it's just like it's a tough mold to get out of.
Oh, yeah.
So
and it's shiny and sparkly and it feels good and sounds great, you know.
Right. Well, yeah, and so that all of that just goes back to the conjecture, superstition, speculation, presumption. There's just so much more things that are, as Solomon would say, chasing after the wind and futility.
Yeah.
There's so much more of that seems, you know, I've kind of, you know, I've said in the past that before the internet, and you live in a small town like Bancroft of 500 people, and you go to a school where your graduating class is less than 100, it's like there's only so much culture that can come at you. You've got 12 channels on the TV, you know, and there's just not that much going on. But now every weird aberration of culture that you might want to expose yourself to can be seen at the click of a button, and it's pressing in on you.
Yeah.
Like with this incredible, and it's just all of it. It's just like culture overload, and it's almost like how in the world do you fight back against that?
Yeah, and just get on, like for me, I just get on Facebook and I have about 400 friends that are so diverse. So everybody's got their own different culture or whatever they want to talk about. I mean, it's mostly divided, you know, most of the people I hang out with are like me, but there's a lot that are not. And just seeing their culture, and it's like, so you just open Facebook nowadays, open Instagram nowadays, open any of these social medias, and you're getting hit with everybody's
Right.
different worldview.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just in my newsfeed, it's like I got people at my company. They're talking about trucking and this and that, and this is their world. And why trucking's bad, why this company isn't as good as it could be. And then the next thing's like maybe somebody talking about their Jeep. The next person's talking about this and you know, whatever.
Yeah.
It can be anything, you know, and you're just getting hit by all these different pieces of the world, and it's worldly views and worldly thinking. And then, you know, every 10 or so, maybe like somebody sharing something Christ-centered, you know, is almost more rare than anything else, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, because
Yeah,
you
I've got
too controversial. I mean,
yeah. Yeah. If you share anything about Jesus, you're stepping in mud too. But yeah, I've got a friend on social media that she'll share, like the only thing she ever posts is always like scriptural encouragement, and I'm always, whenever she posts something, I'm always like, yes, thank you. Somebody's out there.
Somebody lit another candle. Hallelujah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I just think it just gives people a like a buffet, an endless buffet of things to put their confidence in other than the Word of God.
Yeah. And really, like, I think I shared this with you, Dennis, just on a phone call or something, like when we're talking about just like the outcomes of the election. And to me, it's like, well, I really hoped it went one way. Maybe it still will go that way. We don't really know, but okay, whatever. I'm just going to move on because this isn't the best world I'm going to experience.
Oh, thank God, right?
The best life I'm going to experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yet for some people on the other side, it's like they're trying to create their utopia here and now. And
Yes.
this is the best they will ever have.
Right.
Yes.
Even if we were living our lives like in poverty, living under a bridge, eating trash, as believers, our next life is going to be so much better.
Right.
And for some people, even if they're living the best life here on earth, this is the best life they will ever have.
Yeah. Yeah. I shared, I think this is on Twitter. I posted, someone had said, well, what do we do if 74 million people don't concede the results of this election? And I just thought, what do you mean? What do? You tweet hashtag not my president, and then you move on with your life. That's what you do. Like that, there's nothing. What are you going to do? Fight back against the world system? Like,
yeah.
So yeah, it's man, it's yeah. Well, you said they're trying to build their utopia, and that's what I've become increasingly aware of, is that we focus a lot, and I'm not saying that this is right or wrong, but we do focus a lot on what Jesus did when he was here on earth, healing the sick and doing all this kind of stuff, and raising the dead and all that kind of stuff. And I think he's giving a glimpse of what it would be like in Jesus's utopia.
Yeah.
And that's what the Jews wanted, was the utopia of the kingdom. And the problem is, if you have utopia without having justification, nobody would be invited. It would be God sitting there with the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Like, so he has to do something about the changed nature of humanity. Then
Right.
we can be a part of that kingdom. But even in the church, it's kind of like we have to do what Jesus did and make this place. I mean, Jesus didn't come to make this world better. Like, he came to save people, and he'll come back and make the world better. But I mean, if he says that in this world we'll have trouble and that people will persecute us for living for him, how then do we conclude, well, if I live for Jesus and do the things that Jesus says to do, it will make the world better? He says it's going to make it worse, at least for me, and for those who live that way. So
Yeah, and that's like goes with this chapter, is like our faith based on facts, and looking at the Bible, and you see these, and I can give you some facts. In Revelation, there is no America.
Who? What?
One of the seven churches is not here in America, so we don't know what's going to,
Philadelphia, come on. I thought that was.
yeah, sure. And, we got that, and facts are, hey, there is going to be a revolution, and that's going to be Jesus riding in on a white horse. And
right.
not to say like, okay, well, I'm just going to sit here and do nothing and just, be persecuted. Like maybe there will be a day to stand up, but I don't think today's that day. When you
Yeah, not over this.
and you have this faith, and it goes, okay, the Democrats are in power. Okay, well, back to work. I got stuff to do.
Someone has to work and pay the bills in this country, so I guess it might as well be me. Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think that's true. Like, it doesn't matter what is our commission. Our commission is to make disciples of all the nations. It's all the other stuff that we might try to engage in. It's like, that's good, you can do all that stuff, but like, what does it matter whether you feed somebody and they don't starve to death, but then 20 years later they die and go to hell? I mean, that's okay. You made a little bit of a utopia here on earth for a person, but you didn't do what was most necessary.
So in something, maybe just a little bit to wrap up here, Josh, like in our last episode, Dennis and I, we kind of talked about this book, Green Letters, and just kind of like what our experience was with it. And maybe you can just kind of talk a little bit about, in a way to encourage people, not just to maybe listen to our podcast, like not trying to serve that, but just what would you say would be, like, how has this book impacted you? And what would be the advantage you would tell somebody to read this book and move on in the next chapters?
Sure. All right. So I guess, man,
Because was this book presented to you when you were in Bible college, or more like missionary training school, or
Oh, yeah, this was I would call
even
it,
before that?
no, I had never heard of Miles Stanford before Bible school. I don't know, you guys don't remember Mike McKay, I don't think, Michael
I
McKay.
do. I do.
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay,
We're trying
so,
to get him. We're trying to get him on an episode.
oh my
So
gosh, please do. Yeah, no, that'd be fantastic. So the now Dr. McKay was my dean, and I was invited to a Green Letters, I don't know, what do we call it? I think we called it a Green Letters Bible study book club. I don't know, book club sounds kind of cheesy,
we,
but it was something like that.
I'm sure we kind of subconsciously elevated the Green Letters to the level of a Bible by calling it a Bible study, and we really just sat around and.
And
Right?
Josh, remind me, you were in your class. You were in like the off class, right?
Yeah. So I came in
where you were in like
January,
a small class, weren't you?
tiny class, January of '99. I mean, Dennis, you were joking about Bancroft being a town of 500. I grew up in Gregory, Michigan. Also, I think we maxed out at 500 on like the 4th of July. And
These numbers are so foreign to me. I couldn't imagine.
I know, right? Went to Stockbridge High School. You know, my graduating class, I think we had 98 in our class. So I get the small class thing, and our Bible school class was a January class, so it was the off class, and we started with 33 and graduated with 11.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was ideal, really. I mean, 11, students sitting under one teacher. It was in essence a small group discussion for every class, which was fantastic. And so I think it was my sophomore semester. I was hanging out with, some juniors and seniors, and they were arguing about something that came up. And, they were like, hey, you should come to Green Letters with me. And I was like, what the heck is Green Letters? And so I went, and we were talking about, I don't even remember which chapter we started on. But what spun out of that was, a great relationship with a bunch of guys that wanted to chew on the meaty portions of the Word of God and the challenging thoughts, like we've been doing here. And there was no, like, if you said something stupid, they called you on it, and if you made a claim that wasn't scriptural, they'd bust your chops for it. And it was fantastic, and challenging as a young Bible student to really be forced to, you got to know what you're going to say and what you're thinking before you open your mouth. Like, it reminds me of this, the majority of our conversation about, unless our faith is established on facts, it's not anything more than conjecture, and that's really where it landed in so many of those discussions. Like, where's your fact for that? Where's the verse that backs that statement up? And so for me, like, the biggest encouragement is like, this book is just packed full of the wisdom of a sweet old guy that loved God and loved the Son of God and the Word of God. And he wanted everyone that he knew to have that same relationship. And, I wish you could see my book. I don't even, honestly, like, the pages are yellowed. I would jokingly say they're tear stained, but I've underlined it, with, I've got pink highlighter and blue highlighter and orange and yellow and pens and pencils, like notes scribbled everywhere, because it seems like each time I go through it with a different group of people, somebody's got something else that sparks another thought that pulls from the Word of God, that feeds into my understanding of a life that can be lived in victory over sin, and in joy of, enjoying my relationship with Christ, and enjoying this relationship with an almighty, omnipotent, heavenly Father that wants my relationship to be conformed to the image of his relationship with his son, which is mind-blowing as a human, because I know that I don't act or think or talk or, live like Christ did at this stage of my life. But the promise is that I will be conformed to that image. And I feel like Miles has done such a great job of breaking it into, a few page morsels of a conversation that you can have that will take you into further conversation with God. And like, one of my favorite quotes from the whole book is actually in this chapter, and I'm going to read it to you. It's from the last paragraph of the chapter. And Miles says this: "Actually, we cannot trust anyone further than we know him. So we must not only learn the facts involved, but must always intimately come to know the one who presents and upholds them." And I think there are so many times in my life that I've just had to go back to, back before God on my knees and claim ignorance. I didn't know that you could love me in spite of that. I didn't know that I could say no to that because I just didn't know you that well. And I think, to me, there's such hope in that quote, because I can continuously hope to grow. I can continuously hope to learn. And I've never been disappointed, and I am convinced that I will never be disappointed as I read God's word and study the God of that word, that I will never be disappointed in my search for fellowship with God. And I know that that's going to continue to come by faith as I trust him to be true.
So now mine's not, well, I don't have the book. I've been using it on my iPhone with it out of the iBooks, whatever. But that's funny because that's one of the ones I have highlighted there is talking about like any further than cannot trust anyone further than we know him. And it's so true. And so that's like almost sort of like that, this sort of key verse to, or not verse, but sentence to the rest of the book is like, as you start to know God.
That was a Freudian slip. Oh.
Yeah, really. But that knowing him, and the more you know him and you can walk with him and just walk through the rest of the chapters of this book, it kind of like builds on itself through that.
Yeah. I think it, like, to me, I go back to that when I'm talking to like a young believer, who is wrestling, who's wrestling with pornography or, whatever, that like they can't see beyond that. And it goes back to, listen, you're still new at this. You don't know how good God is yet. You keep learning, you keep studying his word, you keep your mind in the word of God, and you're going to know him more, and you can trust him more. And as you trust him more, you can trust him more again. And that wall, that foundation just keeps getting thicker, and it keeps getting taller. And, soon you've got this massive foundation that you can't even reach up to shake the walls yet.
Well, as Jesus says, you search the scriptures because in them you think you have life, but they point to me.
Right.
But you don't come to me because you don't want life. So, the word of God's great because it reveals to us who God is, and we can know him more.
While Faith in Focus is a ministry of In Faith, the views and opinions expressed in this podcast don't necessarily reflect the views and opinions of In Faith as a mission. If you like what you heard on this episode, why don't you become a monthly supporter of the ministry? It really helps me out. $10 a month, or whatever the Lord lays on your heart. So if you're interested in becoming a partner, you can text the word discipleship to 41444, or head over to infaith.org/Dennis-Sotheby. And if you have any questions or topics that you would like me to address on a future episode of Faith in Focus, why don't you shoot me an email? You can email me at dennissoutherby@infaith.org. Just put in the subject line, question for Faith in Focus or something like that. So I can see it, know that it's from you, and know that it's an issue that you would like me to address.